Hello and welcome to this week's episode. We have something that is unique for you in a couple of different ways. We've talked about the fact that we now do student loan reviews. So if you are interested in having a one-on-one session with me, we now have the capacity to do so. But in some instances, there are student loan cases where we think it's instructive for the larger podcast audience to hear. So instead of charging for that review, we say, hey, this is unique enough to not charge. Instead, we would just ask that you be willing to have your case out as a regular episode. This is one of those episodes. And by the way, if you think that your case is unique enough that it would benefit the larger audience and prevent you having to pay for that session, you can go to escapestudentloandebt.com/review for that. So one-on-one session, escapestudentloandebt.com/session. If you think you have a unique case that would be good for the wider audience, escapestudentloandebt.com/review. We will put the links to both in the show notes. But the second reason that this episode is a little unique is I intentionally chose a session that we recorded where the advice that I would give the person today has changed from the time of the recording. The reason I thought that that would be interesting to do is because we've mentioned the fact that as all of this litigation changes, as all the rules change, the plan that you have now could be radically different 6 months from now. And while I love for you to continue to listen to these podcast episodes, I also want you to be building up your own ability to identify when a change is required. So after this brief pause, you're going to hear the recording of that episode. We changed the person's voice. Typically, we won't do that, but this person is someone that I know well, has a very distinctive voice that would be very easily identified by other people who listen and know him well. So we changed his voice in that process. My response to his comments is a little rushed. So I promise you, I'm not as big of a prick as I sound because in the recording, I'm cutting him off before he can even finish the sentence. I was letting him finish the sentence in real time. It's just the editing process. By no means am I Spike Lee. We did the best that we could, but I think you'll enjoy it. And then after the episode ends, there'll be another pause and I'm going to tell you what needs to be changed based on my initial recommendations to this person. Avon, welcome to the Escape Student Loan Debt podcast.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
We appreciate you being on. We definitely appreciate you indulging my references from The Wire. We are going to go through some of your student loans today. I share before we hit record that I don't think it'll be too long of an episode because I do think that once you've established a strategy based on what I've seen from your documents, what to do next will be relatively straightforward. But before we dig into the details, if you could, don't share any identifying information about where you live or what you do, but if you could give me an idea of, hey, here's about what I earn, household situation in terms of are you married, children, any of those different types of things. Tell us a little bit about yourself without sharing your name and where you work.
Okay, sure. So I've been in my career for over 15 years. I live in a major city. Currently, I earn around $165,000. And we discussed this before we started recording, but I just recently I'm about to shift positions, and the new comp that I will be earning is over $180,000. I have some governmental loans that I've acquired from undergrad, and I have some private loans that I acquired when I was in grad school. And that's my financial situation. Oh, I'm single. I don't have any kids. I take care of my family, mostly my mom, and I guess we could leave it there, unless there's anything else.
That was a great description. I gave you a tall task of describe yourself without telling me anything about yourself. So we'll talk a little more. We'll talk a little more about that private loan in a little bit. But let's focus on the federal loans before we get started, and we're going to eventually pull these up on the screen. If you're watching this on YouTube, you do have some federal student loans, and tell me about the status of those loans, meaning are you currently paying them? Are they in forbearance? And if they are in forbearance, presuming that would be from the SAVE plan, if you can remember, tell us about what you were paying prior to the forbearance.
Oh, so yes, I am on forbearance. The forbearance started with COVID, like everyone else. And during COVID, I believe I was still paying. Right now, I have it set to pay around $360 a month, if I'm not mistaken. But it's still on forbearance. So if I need the extra money, well, before when I went back on forbearance, I was still trying to just pay the 360. And then after speaking with a couple of relatives, I realized, all right, let me not put the 360 in this forbearance. I'll just add this 360 to my private loans, which I was still paying. Those couldn't be on forbearance. Now, if I have something that I want to do in the middle of the month that causes me to go outside my budget, then I'll use that 360. But if I don't, then I'll just add that to the monthly payment that I'm paying my private loans. I set that up so that it's for 10 years, and I figured, all right, if I can pay an extra 360 a month, this will drop the amount of time that I have to pay for that one.
Okay. So you let's go to those private loans and take a look at them. Let's see here. If you're following along on YouTube, you're looking at a de-identified statement from Avon's private student loans. It looks like as of May 2025, you owed just over $32,000 on your statement. And I see here what you're talking about, a regular monthly payment of $389. So that's what you're talking about, where basically in the months that you're able to, you will essentially double up that payment. Is that accurate?
Yes. Right now I have, so before you helped me out, I was paying monthly around $460 for this loan, and then you told me or reminded me that I needed to refinance because the interest rates went down and my payment went down. So because my payment went down, I was already comfortable paying $460 a month. I just kept paying $460, and then now, yeah, I'm adding on another $300 that I would be paying for my federal loans, but those are still in
Well,
forbearance.
it's interesting because if you're looking at this statement, there are a few things, and you did bring up the fact that we had a previous conversation, and that the reason for that conversation was twofold. First, it was, you're right, at the time that we had the conversation, private student loan rates had gone down. And one of the things that we talk about on this podcast is the fact that because of the uniqueness of how you figure out what your interest rate would be with private student loans, it's actually something that you can check like frequently. I tell people to check as frequently as quarterly to figure out if there's an opportunity to lower the interest rate on your private student loans or to refinance a federal student loan with a private lender. So as you can see on this statement, the interest rate that you're currently paying is 5.36%. So that was part of the recommendation. You checked, you were able to lower that interest rate. The other is something that you actually see next to the interest rate. It's fixed. So if you recall, another reason that I said, hey, you need to look into changing this is because you had a private student loan, but it had variable interest rates.
Yes, and when he started jumping those rates, I was looking at my payments like, what is happening here? And I was like, oh wait, Brendan talked about refinancing. Let me remind him, and you helped me out.
Absolutely.
I appreciate that.
So that's definitely something where I'm bringing this up not to pat myself on the back, but it's a reminder to people who may have private student loans to check the structure of those interest rates, because they may find that they're also in variable rates and they're wondering, okay, why is my payment increasing? Or they're unaware of the fact that even if it hasn't already, it could increase if interest rates go up in the future. So that's definitely one of the reasons, I should say the second reason why I was like, hey, take a look at this refinance loan. So now we have a fixed rate. We have 5.36%, which is a phenomenal interest rate relative to what's available in the market right now. You have a required payment of $389, and in months that you're putting about another $360 on top of that, which was the amount that you would have had to pay towards your federal student loans. That's accurate? Okay.
Yes.
Now, the next thing that I want to bring up is I can actually probably do some reverse calculations. I'm pulling out my phone, not because I'm texting, but it's easier to use the calculator on my phone. If I had to guess that if you were paying about $360 a month, that's $4,300 a year. I'm going to try to figure out about what your income was from your student loan servicer at the time that that income was calculated. So let me see here. We're going to assume that that payment each year is about 10% of your discretionary income. That would make your discretionary income $43,200. If you are single, I am going to assume, I don't want to spend too much time with my back of the napkin math, that at the time that your payments were last calculated, you were likely earning around $80,000 to $90,000 a year.
That's a very, very good guess. I was just under
There you go.
$80,000.
It's almost like I've
Yeah.
done this before.
Yeah.
So the reason that I'm bringing that up is because you said at the beginning that you just accepted a role that's now in the 180 range. Is that accurate? All right.
Yes.
So just for frame of reference, it's going to take a while for your student loan servicer to catch up to what you are currently earning. You know, I typically
Yes, let them take their
Right.
time,
So,
please.
so you know, that's something where you don't have to make a payment at all because of the save forbearance. But even if you did, you're probably talking about sometime middle of 2026 at the absolute earliest, where they would get their hands on a tax return that showed even what you were making at the previous employer. So you do have some time, but I want to kind of show you some numbers on our Escape Student Loan Debt Guide to Repayment Plans, kind of what could happen once those payments catch up to your current income. So I am going to, let's see, put your adjusted gross income. I know you saying 180, but I also recognized from the pay stubs that you submitted, which those are for a different job, so we're not going to go through them like we typically would, that you are, if not maxing out, you're close to maxing out your 401k. Is that accurate?
Yes, I have made that. I made a commitment
Okay,
to do
so if you're maxing out your pre-tax 401k, that lowers your adjusted gross income, and as we've talked about, that benefits you in also lowering your payment under income-driven repayment plans. So even though you're at 180, we're going to take that 23,000 or so that you're putting in your 401k, and we're going to use it to reduce your adjusted gross income. So we're going to just assume that it's around, we'll just round it out and do $155,000 of adjusted gross income as that reduction based on your 401k. We're going to change your family size, and then we are going to put in an estimate based on the amount that you currently owe in federal student loans, which, if I recall correctly, was around $115,000. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Let's put that in. And we don't have an interest rate that shows up on your loan since they're in forbearance, but we're just going to assume that they're at 6% interest. All right. Let's see where that lands us. I want to point this out to you. If you're looking, and some of this is bad news that I'm sure you were expecting, but this is showing you your projected payment plan on some of these options. We're going to bring up why even these options are not going to be available potentially in the near future. The SAVE plan is going to go away, but under the SAVE plan, you would have paid about $504 a month. If you're grad school loans, which they are, then it would be about $1,000 a month. Under pay as you earn in the new income-based repayment plan, it would be about $1,100 a month. And then what I want to point your attention to is the last two, the old version of income-based repayment and the 10-year standard plan. You will see that both of those payments are listed at $1,276 a month. Do you see that?
Unfortunately, I do.
Don't
see
worry,
that.
I don't think that's what's going to be what you end up paying. But the reason that they say the same thing is we have discussed that when you get to the point where you owe about as much as you make in student loans, or you owe less than what you make, you're in a scenario where it might be better for you to pay off your loans as compared to having them forgiven. You're seeing that illustrated here because the payment is listed as the same under these two plans because you have lost your financial hardship for old income based repayment. Essentially meaning that it actually saves you money to pay your loans back on a 10-year standard plan as compared to what you would pay on the old version of income based repayment. And as a result, they will allow you to keep getting credit towards income driven repayment plan forgiveness, but the actual payment that you make will be the 10-year standard payment. Does that make sense?
I think I understand
So
what you're
think about
saying.
it this way. If you were going to try to have your student loans forgiven, one of the requirements would be that they, calculate your payment based off of your income. So that would
Yeah.
take 20 or 25 years depending on your payment plan. And let's say that when they do that calculation based on your income, it would cost you $1,500 a month. Well, they're then going to look at how much it would take to just pay your student loans off in 10 years. And that payment, as you see here, is about $1,250 a month. So from their perspective, they're saying, why would we put him on a plan that has him paying for 20 years at $1,500 a month when if he pays just $1,250, not just, but you know what I mean, they'll be paid
Yeah.
off in full in 10 years. We'll just put him on the 10-year plan. So that's why you see that same payment, even though you still be getting credit. They're saying there's not much benefit in using this option when you could just pay it off in 10 years. Does that clarify it?
Yeah, I
Okay.
get it now. They're pretty much just saying there's no reason to do any kind of trickery. Your best bet is to just take a nice 10-year amortization and pay
Right,
this down.
right. Now, if we compare what you're currently paying in total, which is about $800 a month, if you had option to these lower payment plans like pay as you earn, new income based repayment, while nobody wants to pay $1,100 a month, you'd be talking about a $300 a month increase as compared to almost a $500 increase under old income based repayment. The problem, however, is based on this new administration's proposed budget plan that's currently in the Senate. They would be doing away with all of these payment plans except the old version of income based repayment, the option that we just discussed, in a new plan called the Repayment Assistance Plan. The Repayment Assistance Plan, based on your level of income, would require you to pay a flat 10% of your adjusted gross income. So if we have your adjusted gross income at $155,000, you would be paying, let's see, $15,500 per year in your payments, and that would
What?
break down to, let me see here,
It looks like it'll be
close to the same.
what the
Yeah,
10
close
year.
to the same. So 10 years at 1,276, repayment assistance plan $1,292. So you're not getting really any relief from that option either, if that makes sense.
Yes, unfortunately, it does make sense.
I understand. I understand. Now let's talk about some strategies to put you in a position where you're better off than you were before. Hopefully, otherwise there'd have been no reason for you to sign up for this call. I want to slightly disagree with your family members who said, "Hey, since you are not required to make payments on the save plan, you can take that money that you were paying and you can use it to double up on the payments that you're paying towards the private student loan that has an interest rate." So right now the interest rate is low. It's 5.36%. So when you make that extra payment, you are getting the benefit of, hey, I'm knocking this payment down a lot faster than I would have. I'm accelerating my repayment schedule. However, if I'm going to tell someone where to put money, I want them to, in most cases, not all, but in most cases, I want them to put money, if they're paying down debt, where they're getting the best bang for their buck in terms of how much principal they're repaying with each payment. You following me? Now,
Yes.
if you're looking at this, yes, you pay 5.36% interest, which is very low. But with the SAVE plan, as long as you are in forbearance, they do allow you to make payments towards your SAVE plan student loans, but the interest that's accruing is 0%. So instead of you putting extra money towards your private loans, you might consider the fact that eventually interest is going to start accruing on this debt again. But right now, any dollar that I pay, it pays off the full dollar in principal because of that lack of interest.
I should be putting money to reduce my principal on
That
this.
would be my, people have different opinions. To me, some would say, "Oh, well, you're decreasing the amount of interest that's accruing on your private student loan by reducing the balance faster." And I can understand that philosophy, but I would feel if you're looking at the total debt and not just isolating them and thinking, "Well, this is my private student loan, this is my federal student loan." If you think about it as collective debt, I'd be saying, where can I put this dollar and get the best return on the investment? And to me, putting it at a place where it's like, hey, you may be paying $350, but maybe $25 of that is going towards interest. Well, that's still good, but it's not as good as paying $350 towards a federal student loan and the entire $350 is reducing that balance. So
Yeah, no,
yeah,
that's a good
so
idea.
it's something to consider, because when you look at whenever the interest resumes on this federal student loan, there will be two scenarios that could occur. Maybe there's a third and I'm just not thinking of it. One scenario is you look at the interest rate that they're now charging on that federal student loan debt, and you say, hey, I actually can refinance this with a private lender and I can get a better interest rate. And if that's the case, you may decide to refinance it and have a second separate private student loan. So now you'd have this one where you owe about 35,000, and then you'd have this one that you owed about 113. Or you may decide to take both of those now private loans and combine them into a new loan. So at that time, based on the interest rates, based on the payment structure, it's something where you'll have that option to figure out which you prefer. But to me, because it's a possibility, it being the possibility that you might be refinancing this federal debt, I would be trying to refinance the smallest amount possible. And even if you don't refinance it, one of the interesting ways about how interest accrues on federal student loan debt is it accrues based on the principal, and the interest is set in a different category. That sounds very confusing, so let me explain it with like real numbers. Right now, for easier math for me, let's say that you owed $100,000 at 5% interest. You tracking with me? The
Yes.
way that most debt works is if you have interest that's accruing on that debt at 5%, at the end of the year, you would have $5,000 of interest that accrued on your 100,000 worth of debt. You still tracking with me?
I
If
got
this
you.
were a conventional type of financing, that $5,000 would be added to the principal. So now you owe $105,000, and the next year you would have 5% accruing on $105,000. You following me? Federal
Yes.
student loans don't work that way. The way federal student loans work is if that first year occurs and you didn't pay anything and had $5,000 worth of interest accrue, they set that interest in a separate category. And the next year, even though you technically in total owe $105,000, they are still charging that 5% on the original $100,000 of principal. Are you seeing the difference?
I definitely see the
So
difference.
when you, oh, go ahead.
Okay. No, I would have
Yeah.
a question. What would trigger them capitalizing that interest? What would trigger them putting that interest onto the principal balance?
Well, in some cases, it is removing yourself from an income-driven repayment plan. In others, it would be consolidating your student loans. So you take, they can't keep it separate if you're putting two loans into one loan. But those are the two major things. And when you use the term capitalization, just in case you're listening and don't understand that term, he's basically saying what would make them take that $5,000 that's sitting separately and add it on to the 100. So now I am paying interest on the 105. And those are the two major scenarios where you see that occur.
Okay, got it.
So going down that line of thinking, even if you keep the loans with the federal government, if you have paid down the principal, when interest starts accruing, it's going to be accruing on a smaller number. Following me? And
Yes.
even if you do decide to refinance it with a private lender, when they capitalize the debt, because the private lender is going to take both categories, and that's now what you owe the private lender, they're going to be taking over less interest and less principal. So you'll be refinancing a smaller amount than what you would have refinanced if you did what you're doing now, where you're just leaving that loan by itself.
That makes sense.
So, you make your final decisions. But my recommendation, I think that what your family recommended was sound advice if you're thinking of these as two separate entities, right? It's not connected debt. I'm just trying to figure out the best way to pay this loan down. And the fact of the matter is, if you're trying to pay one loan down, then the quickest way to do it is to pay extra on that loan. But if you think of it as collective debt, and positioning both loans so that if they are ever combined, or even as you pay them down separately but together, if you know what I mean, then I think that the ideal path would be to take advantage of this period of 0% interest and make those extra payments directly towards the principal of that federal student loan.
I can't argue against that. I think I listened to your show, and it when it came on to student debt and understanding where my balance was, I just knew that this was a marathon, and that I'm not going to wake up one morning 2 years from now, it's going to be completely gone. And so I was paying whatever they just asked. But with my private loans, and during COVID, when they never shut off the private loans. The federal loans were the ones that they told everybody, it's going to be on pause. And I saw my private loans they were at a number that I thought, hey, this is like an expensive car. I think I can knock this down or get rid of this entirely, because I didn't want, when everything to start, I'm looking at $1,600 a month or something crazy, where it's just a significant chunk of my disposable income. But I heard from a few people saying, oh, you should be paying down this, it drops the principal. Hearing what you're saying now, it's something I should be considering. And I'll definitely look into that. I mean, I'm leaning towards considering what you're saying.
Now, I'm glad you're giving me that consideration. I do want to show you something that I think, again, sometimes you have to go backwards to move forwards. And when it comes to student loan debt, I think that's very true, because what people can get into the habit of is treating the repayment of that debt as if it's completely separate from the balance of their finances. And then all of a sudden they can't invest, they can't pay down other debt like credit cards or anything like that, because they're so aggressively paying down their student loans that it doesn't leave room for anything else. So I know right now you, with your private student loans, are in a position where you're trying to pay them back within 10 years. I want to show you an example of something that, again, it's up to you to figure out which way is the best path. Excuse me, but what you're looking at here, this is not a recommendation for SoFi, even though that's who has your current private student loan. But I went actually to SoFi to look at a student loan refinancing calculator. So I put in the $115,000 that you owe in federal student loans, and I put it at 6% interest. And I said, let's assume that he has 120 months payments left. That's 10 years. You can see it calculates that payment that we saw in our calculator, about $1,250 a month. However, if I look and I see, all right, what if instead of doing it in 10 years and combined having a payment between those two loans of $1,600 a month, we kicked the repayment calendar out to 15 years. Now you can see that based on your credit, and we don't have to show it on screen, but you have a high you're proud of it. All right, let's show it. All right, let's see here. Let's see here. I hear you. You worked hard for it. Let's show it. 1 second.
It's not something I can talk about at dinner. It's all right, but if I'm in a place where it finally comes up,
yeah,
sure.
So you're right. If there's a time where you can show it on screen without having to share your name, then why not? Let's see here. All right. So as you can see, Avon Barksdale has an 824 credit score. So the combination
Oh, really?
the combination of your high credit score and also your high income is going to qualify you for the best of interest rates no matter what you're applying for. So if I take that in mind, I can go back to the student loan refinancing calculator and I can see that right now you're paying about five and some change in terms of your interest rate on your 10-year debt. SoFi for their 15-year on the lowest end of the range, meaning people with the strongest financial profile, they are offering interest rates as low as 5.38%. So that is very comparable to what you're currently paying, even though it's a 5-year longer repayment. And if you're looking at this, that means that you would have monthly savings as compared to the 1,250 of anywhere from $133 a month to almost $350 a month. So yes, it would be, still a big increase as compared to right now. You're paying about $700-800. You're talking about maybe paying about $1,000 or $1,100 in total. So it's still a $300 or $400 a month increase, but it's much more reasonable than going from 800 to 1,600. And if you do, again, you may have a lower interest rate than 6% on your federal student loans. But if you did have a 6% interest rate, just going down to 5.3 and some change, it gives you lifetime savings of a significant amount, tens of thousands of dollars. So to me, I would also, when it comes time to consider whether you're going to stick with the federal government or refinance, to be clear, if you figure out that your loans are at like 2.5 or 3% somehow with the federal government, then I would just stay put and pay them back with the federal government. But if you are like many people with whom we work, where they have like a 6.75% interest rate on their federal student loans, not only would I consider refinancing with a private student lender, I would also consider being slightly less aggressive on your repayment schedule than your current 10-year note, even if it means lumping that $30,000 in with this interest rate and this loan, so that you can have the flexibility to continue to invest. Because as I tell people, there's no reward that comes with paying off student loan debt beyond just not having that payment. It is much better to have invested along the way. And even if it means taking a little longer to pay off the debt, being able to have those investments to show for it. All right. Hopefully you were listening closely and you can pick up on the change very easily, because that change is, since the time I recorded the episode with Avon Barksdale, the interest on the save plan has resumed. So when we were talking about whether he should pay extra towards his student loans that had 0% interest, it was based on the idea that you're getting the most bang for your buck in terms of seeing your principal reduce by paying the loan that has no interest at the time. Now that student loan interest has resumed, one of the things I recommended in the original recording is take a look at what the interest on those loans actually is. If it is lower than you can find in the private marketplace, then keep your loans right with the federal government and pay them off. And now maybe it would be more beneficial to pay that extra amount towards the private loans based on wherever he's getting the best return for his dollars. But if he finds that it is 7 or 7.5%, and there is an improvement that he could potentially find in the private marketplace, we covered that this is not the type of person who's going to benefit from income-driven repayment plan forgiveness. He is going to have to pay his loans off in full based on the amount of money he earns. So if there is a decent spread in private student loan interest rates as compared to his federal lender, he should definitely consider a refinance. So this is a subtle tweak that literally, this is something we recorded a couple of months ago. And from then to less than 60 days later, his strategy has changed. And this is a prime example of what could occur based on certain changes. We made recommendations when we thought that Parent Plus borrowers were not going to be able to do income-driven repayment plan, and that has changed. We may make a different recommendation if they come and decide to extend the pay-as-you-earn plan beyond 2028. Things change. And based on your knowledge of student loans, You cannot have to check in with me every 2 weeks to see how your plan could change. You could at least keep up with the news and have an idea of a strategy that is temporary and one that needs to be adjusted as student loans adjust. So I hope this was helpful for you. Again, we will bring more of these to you from time to time if we think it's something from which you can learn, and give you everything we can to have your student loans forgiven, reduced, reorganized, or expedited. From Escape Student Loan Debt, this was the Escape Student Loan Debt Podcast, a show for established professionals whose student loan payments or loan balances are impacting their marriage, their business, their credit, or their dream of achieving homeownership.